You better know me on 5, man. We're back. We're back. Bro, I've been seeing this thing trending all over TikTok right about like the 90s they were capped out, bro, and like Michael Jordan cannot go left to save his life. And he considered himself, what was his guy's name? Isaiah Thomas. So, Jimmy Howard, he ended up a video on that. And what's all these freaking notifications, right? Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Anyways,
we are in the midst of a civil war. The age-old debate of past versus present has been sides have been a revolution is taking place, and we're losing good men. Old school versus new school. Back in the day versus modern day. A story as old as time itself. I tried to ignore it. I thought things couldn't get any worse. It all got so much worse. We done with the 90s. Film of NBA games from the 80s and 90s coming to light, showing that the good old days were in fact not that good. This whole time, the punishing defensive legend was actually just a bunch of plumbers camping out in the paint looking for someone to hack. Shots clanking off the backboard, players running around aimlessly.
Yeah, they be talking about all that. Like,
worst of all,
they be talking about the defense stuff and shit. How like, oh shit, you used to play way better defense back then. Oh fuck. Hell no, you're not.
Yo, thank God I saw it before. Okay, but like I was saying, yeah, maybe y'all were hearing me double, but yeah, like, bro, they were always talking about how like defense was way harder back then, but it wasn't. It was just people hacking.
The supposed greatest basketball player of all time didn't even have a left hand. What is going on? Have we been lied to about basketball in the 80s and 90s? Are we really done with that era of hoops?
Yeah, well, who's finding this footage? Like, I don't know. I mean, what was even uploaded back then? Bro, who's getting this like info? I don't get it, bro.
Lights, misinformation,
who's behind all this?
Clips. Well, I think I've got an answer, and some of y'all ain't gonna like it.
When they Shaq.
Today's video is sponsored by SeatGeek. It's on SeatBest, using it order seating around. Well thought out, simple words.
Done with the 90s.
I've completely divided fans of the NBA. I've seen well thought out video essays, hard-hitting analysis, testimonies from past and present players talking about their experience in the league and how it's changed over the years. And none of those things managed to do what these 5 simple words have done in just a week. Soon enough, the clips came
I can see that shit everywhere.
From that era dribbling off their feet, throwing up air balls, and putting together moves that you might see at your local high school's JV game. So, for whatever it's worth, here is my long-winded take on this whole discussion.
Bro, back then, I feel like there's no possible way they could, like, the NBA back then could ever be better than the NBA now. Because you know how much criticism the NBA players have to go now? Like, back then it would be like, it wouldn't be as much, but like, bro, cause what? Like, you wouldn't have somebody on Twitter telling you like, oh, you suck, bro. Fuck your mom, fuck your dad. Like, you just sold my parlay. Like, they wouldn't have none of that. Now, like, they get critiques from everyone, like literally every single person, because everybody has a platform.
I want to begin by saying what this discourse has taught me more than anything else is that NBA fans today never actually took the time to go back and watch games of the past.
Yeah, for what?
Brothers, I have been harping on this for years, begging for fans
People
of the
barely
game,
go back to see the picture that they
took
took like
for
years, a week ago.
To just go back and watch full games. Not highlights, not clips, full-length games of eras from the past. And after seeing this discussion devolve into where it is today, it is clear to me that most people never take the time. I'm seeing countless fans have this sort of awakening as they're watching films of these old games as if the footage was buried or lost, and it's finally being unearthed for the world to see. It's been right here on YouTube for the past 15 years. You mean to tell me the same fans who chime in with a full-blown thesis?
Yeah, bro, I do be seeing the NBA posting like, oh, the full game, like, from those old ass games. Was like, bro, who the fuck gonna sit there watch? Like, I don't even know a bunch of plumbers versus what, Michael Jordan, and then
spared the time
for an hour and a half. Like, bro, I can't do that.
They were referring to. I guess that does explain a lot. Now, I'd like to think I'm somewhere in the middle on this whole discussion. I have said on multiple occasions that players in today's NBA are simply more skilled than players of the past, which has resulted in bigger stat lines and higher point totals than ever before. It's not the defense that has gotten worse, it's the offense that has gotten better. You know, that whole spiel. But I also have an appreciation for the greats that came before and how incredible some players of past eras were. In fact, I almost feel like I'm hallucinating seeing this 90s basketball slander campaign unfold in front of my eyes. It feels like everyone's perception on the age-old debate changed literally overnight. I know that's not the case, but after seeing all of this play out, it sure feels that way. But today, I'm not just gonna show you some cherry-picked clips or unhinge this narrative even further. I'm gonna show you real film, real data, and proof of how we might actually be done with the 80s and 90s. And of course, if Michael Jordan really had no left hand. Spoiler, he did.
Not. The game, bro.
Now I have been an advocate.
The game has evolved a lot.
Now I have been an advocate for the modern players are better than players of the past movement for quite some time now. In fact, as crazy as it is for younger fans to say,
they learning from the past. Like, I don't know what like some old heads even argue about that. Like,
Michael Jordan
they're learning from y'all.
It's just as absurd for older fans to say the game hasn't evolved and gotten better
Michael
over the
Jordan
last
will be
30
years.
Because that's all this debate really is. Young fans versus old fans, or fans that watch this versus fans that are watching this. But objectively, players today are much better than they were in the 80s and even the 90s. Specifically, the lower end of the talent pool in the NBA today is vastly better than it was in the past. I think great players would be great in any era, but with the spacing, the shot making, the emphasis on offense as opposed to defense has made the depth across the NBA today just way ahead of where it was in the 80s and the 90s.
I go back.
The spacing, the shot making, the emphasis. Players would be great in any era. But with the spacing, the shot making, the emphasis on offense as opposed to defense has made the depth across the NBA today just way ahead of where it was in the 80s and the 90s. There was, without exaggeration, guys in the NBA throughout the 80s and 90s that were on NBA rosters just to accumulate fouls and sit in the paint and be big. Some of these players were offensively inept, and that was
that's where the famous picture of Dennis Rodman comes from. Oh shit! I actually never knew that. So now you see nobody even watches these games.
Were offensively inept.
So who else knew
that?
Was
okay because their role was not to create offense. But in today's NBA, where offense reigns supreme, there is no room for these players. Now, you could and should go back and watch film of games, not highlights, from this era and see just how limited the skill sets of some of these players were. The shot making, for the most part, was limited to set jumpers, slashers coming downhill for layups, and big men trying to muscle their way to a bucket down low in the midst of what appears to be a wrestling match. Catch a player off guard with the double team, and they immediately pick up their dribble. Simple things like guards turning their back to the basket 20 feet out instead of creating space off the dribble. Even players looking down at the ball while trying to get out on a fast break was very common in this era. And these aren't lowlights or cherry-picked incidences. This is just what the game looked like 35 years ago. But even without film, nearly every metric suggests modern players are more capable of players in the past. Free throw percentage was worse, three-point percentage was worse, turnover percentage was higher. They used to shoot more free throws, but still ended up with far less points. Now, this is not to say that this era of hoops was trash. That's just disingenuous and flat out wrong. These were the best players in the world at the time. I thought they wouldn't call fouls simply not as good as what it is today. But maybe there's another layer to this that needs to be factored in to really understand why these players were not as skilled as the players of today.
It's crazy. Nobody talks about the 70s. Like, the 70s era, then the 80s era, and the 90s. People only talk about like the 80s, 90s. That's about it. I mean, I don't think none of us were like anybody from the 70s are still
Now,
alive.
despite this being a very relevant topic
were
for
back
years,
then.
the idea of rule changes and how
They
these
probably in the
changes have
2000s they
affected the
were talking
game
about
still
that.
remain a mystery to some. Players were a product of their era
said
and the
Thomas of the
rules
past.
of their era.
Right,
The
that's
first step
Isaiah.
to discovering
That's
greats
the
of the
next.
past is to watch film of them play. The next step is to gather and understand the context of the film you are watching. When you see a 6'9" Magic Johnson go flying down the court with what looks like kind of a stiff dribble, you may think the man has no bag.
What the
But
fuck?
my friends, Magic Johnson did have a bag, but the rules in place at the time only allowed him to reach so far into it before he got called for every violation in the rulebook. Consider the fact that any move where your hand wasn't completely on top of the basketball was considered a carry. No 0 steps, no gather steps, you get 2 steps, and anything more was called a travel. No backward shuffles to create separation, no lunging into players to draw easy fouls. Here's a clip of Danny Ainge hitting Kevin McHale with a hezzy in the mid-80s. And the man thinks he just witnessed witchcraft.
But when practice sessions were completed, some of the most competitive competition began.
What the fuck? Brother didn't even know what a hezzy was? No, he's fighting for his life. He believed that was a double dribble.
Here's some more clips of players getting called for travels and carries doing moves that are very typical and allowed in 2024. 90% of the moves you see today, the very method most players generate their offense, would be called for some sort of violation 40 or 30 or even 20 years ago. And this isn't just some cop-out or excuse as to why these players of the past weren't doing this stuff. The rule changes are real, documented pieces of NBA history. You
That doesn't
can
mean that
literally
they
look
know
them
how to
up.
do it.
The game got looser, players grew up and shaped their game around these looser rules, and now they have free reign to let their basketball bag
Yo, who
run
decided
wild.
to change those rules?
But
If they worked
that's
before.
kind of the point. Players of the past didn't grow up practicing 25-footers. They didn't work on a dozen moves to create separation. They played in offensive systems that focused on the team, the collective, schemes and sets that resembled something closer to college basketball, where ISO possessions were few and far in between, so they never developed an
bro,
arsenal to counter
there's
these
like-
situations.
I
The
think you might see that shit once in an NBA game. I don't even think the Spurs even do that anymore.
rules of the time
And they were like the
limited their
most
game, which resulted in them having a
college-like
more limited
NBA
skill
team.
set than players today. If Larry Bird grew up with a three-point line, he might
God
have
damn, he
been
got
the
fucked.
greatest long-range shooter ever, but he didn't. And as a result, he didn't shoot a lot of threes, and he wasn't as efficient as the best shooters today. We can sit here and assume these players of the past might be as capable as players today if they were playing under the same rules and
Yeah, I
conditions.
think Will Chamberlain
but
will
they
be
didn't.
tough.
And I don't think we should assume that. The fact is, they played in a different time, and they became a product of that time. But that's not to say the game was trash back then, or that the superstars of these eras couldn't compete in today's league.
Yeah, they look so old, and they were probably in their early 20s.
Now, as
At least
time goes
Michael.
by, I think it's easy to forget just how long ago 1980 was. 44 years ago, if my
What
math
the
is correct,
fuck?
which is in fact a very long time ago. In 1985, Magic Johnson won an
That's
NBA
older than my
title,
dad.
Larry Bird won the league MVP, and Michael Jordan won Rookie of the Year. That was 39 years ago.
They're
from
all in
today,
1 year?
Which
That's
is
tough.
the same exact amount of time that has passed from that 1985 season to the year the NBA was founded in 1946. Look at these clips. Do you think these players could compete with the likes of Bird, Magic, and Jordan? Let me answer that for you. No. But take the best players of the 80s and 90s, and could they compete in today's league? Absolutely. Give these guys some credit. Watching this today is the equivalent of watching this in the 80s. And yet this product is vastly closer to the basketball we see today than this product was to what
yeah, that
fans were
shit is
witnessing
nothing
in the
even-
80s. In fact, we can use
They don't
different
even know what a three-point
superstars
line
as
is.
sort of a cross-generational measuring stick
I didn't
to
even
see
know what a
just
mid-range
how
is.
stiff the competition has been over the years. Larry and Magic played Michael, who played Kobe, who played LeBron, who has played the players of today. And nowhere down this timeline was there any real jump or fall off in production or level of competition from one era to the next. Each era had their stars. Those stars crossed paths with stars of other eras, and no one era was clear-cut ahead of the other. If the 80s were so bad, then why did players of the 90s have to wait for those guys to get old and retire to have a shot at winning? And if the 90s were so bad, then why did players of the 2000s not win until those guys retired? We don't need to assume that adjacent eras
They're the
could compete
10s.
with one another because we
They gotta wait
actually
till
saw
the
it.
2000s
MJ
to
struggled
retire.
with some of the
Or
guys
the
that came before
2020s.
him. Shaq
They were
struggled
for
against
2010s
Hakeem,
to
and
retire.
Kobe struggled against MJ. LeBron struggled against guys like Duncan and Dirk. And players of today have struggled to get past some of the older players in the league who are a product of the previous era. Now, what we shouldn't do is jump 3 or 4 eras at a time, ignoring entire decades of evolution and saying the game back then was better or even as good as it is today. At a certain point, the knowledge and wisdom that comes from actually witnessing decades of NBA history, like some older fans have, becomes skewed and watered down by nostalgia and a generational bias. Superstars are superstars because their game transcends the era they played in. But they also play
and they're the
in
best
an inferior
within that
league.
system
These
that
two
was created, you feel me?
ideas are not mutually exclusive. And although generational talents of the past would do just fine today, this same
I was
logic
supposed to
does
drop a
not
video
apply to the
tomorrow.
vast majority of
But
the
next
league
week I got
throughout
y'all
the
with
80s
some
and
bangers on my main channel.
So if the 80s were
God damn it,
inferior
this
to
thing is just
today's
like,
league and the
stop putting
90s
everything
were
all over
inferior
the place,
as
like,
well,
bro, why is
when
it-
did the NBA become not trash? Well, it depends on how you look at it. Ironically, I think there's a pretty clear distinction.
Yo,
to
you
the
know what
skill
I was
set
just thinking, right? When we're like 40, right, and we're like 2040, everybody gonna say the 2000s was ass. Like that era was like trash.
players before Michael Jordan hit
And
his
it's like
peak.
that would be Melo, LeBron. Like, what the fuck? What do you think will be the next LeBron?
And after. For example, the
Like,
early 90s
I
and
don't
late
know.
90s, although being in the same decade, were
crazy.
massively different in play style
The only
and
thing,
skill
like,
set. Think
none
for
of
a
the
second
superstars
about
right
the
now,
fact that Magic Johnson
other than
was
Anthony
still in
Edwards,
his
could be like
prime
the
in
next like
early
LeBron type
90s,
shit.
and Allen
I feel like Anthony
Iverson
Edwards
was
got that,
entering
though.
his prime in the late 90s. In less than 10 years, basketball became a massively different game. By the late 90s, the players who grew up watching Jordan fly through the air and slice up defenses were in the league and were reshaping the role that perimeter players played. Guys like Kobe Bryant, Allen Iverson, Ray Allen, Stephon Marbury, Grant Hill, Tracy McGrady, Vince Carter. All these guys came into the
Paul
league
Pierce.
around the same time and were products of what they saw MJ do throughout his career. Players with a skill set that more closely resembles what we see today than it did to the skill sets of players of the 80s and even early 90s. This is where I think most fans might make the distinction of when the league really took a leap, not in competitiveness, but rather play style. You can go back and watch these guys
Nah, that was
play,
actually
and
clean.
it's
What the
not
fuck is
too
that?
different
I
than
actually
watching
did.
your play. Might make the distinction. You can go back
He's
and
right.
watch really took a
Nah,
leap,
right
not
there.
in competitiveness,
You
but
see, but
rather
what the fuck
play
you really
style.
say?
You can go back and watch
How
these
was he
guys
that
play,
flexible?
and it's not too different than watching an NBA game today.
Nah,
Or you can
son.
point to the shift in play style that happened in the late 2010s.
Oh, shit,
After
nigga.
Steph Curry redefined
Couldn't
what
see
makes a
three
great
like O's?
championship caliber player,
And
and
then
the
become his
league
teammate?
adjusted to this new three-point heavy, perimeter-focused style of basketball. Similar to Jordan, the kids who watched what Steph was doing in the mid-2010s emulated that style of play, tailored their games to it, and are now in the league
Luka's
doing
tough.
things that only Steph could
Jeez.
do a decade ago. Tailored their
That
games
shit was
to it
clean.
and are
Ooh. Has he?
now
Yeah,
in
where
the
you going?
league
Oh,
doing
don't jump,
things
dummy.
that only Steph could do a decade ago.
And with two
So
step backs
if
in
we're
one play.
done with the 80s and 90s, where can we look back and no longer apply this air tax on these players? I think most fans would agree that the turn of the century is where the modern era of hyper-skilled players began. You can say objectively that this era
Yo, y'all like
was
my
not
new
trash,
pic
and most
on my
players
main?
of this
Go check that out.
generation would do just fine in today's
That picture's tough.
But if that is the case, then modern NBA fans are holding a ticking time bomb, and they might not even know it.
Damn. I haven't even seen Victor on play like that, but those highlights look tough. This man really 7'8". 8 foot with shoes on.
When we are older and a new generation of NBA fans claim our favorite players, the guys we grew up watching, are not as good as the players of the future,
That's what I'm
what
saying.
will you have to say? Right
Oh
now,
my
there is
God.
no one in the world who can
Man,
shoot
fuck the
like
new
Steph
kids,
Curry.
bro.
But inevitably, there will be. And eventually, there will be many players who can shoot like him. His records will fall, his percentages won't look as good through the lens of 2040, and although his legacy will be
Yo,
cemented,
what-
his
That's crazy. If somebody actually like becomes better shooter than Curry, like, man, it's gonna happen, but that's crazy though. To think about it, like Curry's really the greatest shooter of our generation. Somebody actually might beat him one day.
Actual game will be put into question. And based on the arguments
just
I'm
like
today on why past players
what is it? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar doesn't have the
nothing to say
scoring title anymore. Now LeBron does.
We know that Curry was the first to do what he's doing. He is a pioneer of the modern NBA. We have context to back up our claims. But if we aren't willing to hear older fans out today, what makes us think younger fans will hear us out in the future?
Ain't nobody hearing us.
Mark my words. There will
They
be a
say,
day
y'all niggas
when
is
young
bugging, bro.
fans
That nigga
will
Curry
go
was
back,
ass.
watch film of LeBron, and say he couldn't compete with players of the future. In fact, it's already happening. Fans saying he has no bag. Younger players putting up bigger numbers than he ever did. Skill sets a bit deeper with games that look more polished. It's all
I mean,
fun and
LeBron's
games
still
now to
tormenting
crack
your
jokes
favorite
about
team on
past
any given
eras.
night. It doesn't
But
really matter.
our day will come too, and it ain't gonna be pretty. But Giannis could only run and dunk. Your era was trash. Y'all had a dude who couldn't get 2 feet off the ground running the whole league. You can scramble to pull up clips and show
Nah, they gonna talk so much shit about Jokic. That's where they gonna really hit us with. Hey, bro, because Jokic really gives you plumber vibes, bro. Like he don't like he plays basketball. I mean, he doesn't give a fuck about basketball. So.
But their minds will already be made up.
They gonna be like, nah, bro, you capping.
It is so important to have genuine,
That nigga was
thought-out
ass.
discourse about the game if you're truly a fan of it. But
See, that was clean.
to all of the older fans out there, you kind of started this whole thing. For years, we heard y'all badmouth modern players, saying the league is soft, players today couldn't compete back then.
Bro, that's what I'm
Back in
saying.
my
It's the
day,
old heads.
real
They
men
started
played
this.
the game.
They
Y'all
always so
cannot
mad they're
be
getting
mad
old, bro.
that some fans are done with the 80s
enjoy it.
and 90s when y'all
The
never
time is
even
coming, my
gave
boy.
modern basketball a chance. Sure, a lot of fans never took the time to go back and watch the greats of the past, but let's be honest for a second. Older fans don't watch games today. They catch a stray clip on Facebook of LeBron flopping, and like an echo chamber of disgruntled old men, they just start
nobody
firing
really
away in
like
the
be
comments,
watching full
agreeing with
game
one
hype,
another.
like full
Y'all
game, bro.
asked for this.
That's
I've
actually,
been watching
like,
the NBA since
once-
the mid-2000s. Kobe,
Bro,
D.
the
Wade,
NBA got
McGrady.
42 games. I'll probably watch a full game, like one game out of 82, bro. Imagine, like, and one game, what can one game tell me? Can't tell me shit. He probably played good all 80 games, and then that one game he just played ass. But that's crazy though. Like, I might watch the fourth quarter, or just the third quarter, the first half. I usually watch the playoffs, but like
Iverson, Shaq,
first,
Nash, those were my
like,
guys.
82
But
games
I can
regular season,
acknowledge those
one
greats
game
and
at
say
most.
They were incredible, while
Who is
also
he? I'm
acknowledging
actually there from
that
the first
version
quarter
of
to
the
the
NBA as a
fourth.
whole was not as refined or as good as
It's not
it
even
is
every
today.
team either.
Now,
I
will
only
I
watch
be
the
able to
Lakers.
make that distinction in 20
Or whatever
years
LeBron is
when
at.
some snot-nosed brat tells me my glorious king was trash? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I'll probably crash out if somebody tells me my glorious king is trash, or one of these young kids beat his ass till his mama finds him. Then Michael Jordan really
Now,
have no
it's
left
time to
hand.
once and for all take a real close look at this accusation.
Not as good
that
as
Michael
LeBron, but
Jordan
he
did
he
not
probably,
have
he
a
probably
left
had a
hand.
pretty
I
decent.
felt like I was having a bad dream when I first saw this claim, but unfortunately, I was not. I feel like no one actually believes this. This is just some high-level trolling. But in an effort to stop this nonsense from spreading any further, I have no choice but to take these accusations seriously. So I selected 8 random games
little
ranging
left-hand
from Michael
compilation.
Jordan's rookie season all the way up to the mid-90s, and play by play gathered all of his possessions throughout these games,
Yo, and
charted when he went to his right,
90s,
when he went to
we're
his
telling
left,
the-
and what those
the 70s,
possessions
like, yo, y'all niggas
resulted
is
in.
butt.
And here is what I found. Jordan made a
And they
move
were
with
butts,
his
so
left
you can't
hand
make
or his right hand
It shouldn't even be mad.
227 times. Of those 227 moves, 121 of them were with his right hand, and 106 of them were with his left hand. Of the 121 right-handed moves, he passed up or got fouled on 54 of them, so I didn't bother charting those. 65 of these moves resulted in a shot, in which he made 63% of them and only turned the ball over 2 times. Now, moves that he made with his left hand resulted in a pass or him getting fouled 45 times, while 55 of these left-handed moves ended up in a shot, in which he made 51%, and 6 moves resulted in a
One left
turnover.
scored.
So, based on this data,
One
Jordan
left
was
was missed.
definitely more comfortable
He
going
was
right,
definitely up there.
especially near the rim and even on mid-range
One left
jumpers.
and turnover
He
6
struggled
times.
a bit in comparison to his right whenever he pulled up off of a left-handed dribble. But overall, Jordan went to his left 47% of the time. And although it was his weaker hand, he was still above league average even while going to his left. But 8 games and 350 minutes of
I don't know
basketball
how
is
left
a
is in my
relatively
life.
small sample size. So I looked into it further and
I
found this.
so I actually don't
A
believe
detailed break-
like that shit. Cause I don't have a left hand, but I feel like if you like no. If you have counters, like that's all you need for real. Like if you have a counter, because okay, you going right, and then the guy's like, fuck, I'm showing you off. So you go left, like go left as much as you can, and hit him with a counter, and then that nigga's already like, fuck this shit, like. Or just go up with your left, bro. Fuck it.
Breakdown of Michael Jordan's shot chart and shot tendencies in 3 seasons from 1990 to 1992. 126 games and over 4,800 minutes in total, tracking exactly what Michael did on the court for 3 seasons. And here's what the data shows. In total, Michael made 1,074 moves in isolation, going either to his right or to his left hand. 48% of those moves were with his right hand, and 52% of those moves were with his left hand. When going to the right, Michael shot 61.7% on 410 shots.
But did he finish with his right though when he went left?
Resulting in 1.38 points per possession. When going to his left, Michael shot 61.3% on 421 shots with 36 turnovers, resulting in 1.31.
Okay, so that might be cap, because the stats are right there, so he does actually go left.
Size, Michael not only had a left hand,
but I already saw this clip of this man doing a behind the back to his right hand. Like, what the fuck?
Just as often as he went to his right, and was nearly as proficient with his left as he was with his right. Now, for some context, throughout this 3-year span, Michael made on average 4.4 left-handed isolation moves, or in this case, isolation possessions, that resulted in 1.31 points per possession. Now, here are some prolific scores from this season and their overall tendencies and efficiency in isolation. Keep in mind, this data includes both right-handed and left-handed moves from these players. And now here is Michael Jordan.
Man, my nigga LeBron all the way at the bottom. What the fuck?
So,
LeBron's tough.
Yeah.
Shea up there.
Contrary to what has now become popular belief,
that's my glorious kid at the bottom.
Had a left hand,
fucking nobody.
And I cannot believe we had to dig into the data to come to this conclusion.
Actually, who the fuck is that? Man, we done with the 90s. Oh, we're not. Man,
I think the overall idea that the 80s and 90s were a far less skilled time in the NBA compared to today is probably fair. I mean, you'd be crazy to think the game hasn't evolved in 4 decades. But to say the league was trash back then is just wrong. I think more than anything, it's the style of play and the way basketball games would unfold back then that really throws some fans off when they go to watch film of these old games. It's like looking at a box score from the mid-2000s and thinking everyone sucked because the games finished with final scores in the 80s. But the players weren't bad, it was just a different game back then. It was slower, more methodical, more team and scheme-based than it is today. And similarly,
I understand that
the 80s and 90s had its fair share
obviously
of
they was not gonna have no
basketball.
Kobe taking like 60 shots. I mean, they had like Michael, but they were not gonna have like a nigga like Shea that's just gonna come in. I don't know, bro. Or like Joel Embiid, right? Like if the ball runs through him. They had like,
that doesn't mean all the players
the ball ran
were
through
bad,
everybody.
especially the superstars of those eras. That was just the state of the game they were playing in. I think
that shit was born back then. I don't think that was sell right now.
The game was
even
back
if they
then,
tried.
But I also
like,
think
it could work,
they just
but it wouldn't sell.
genuinely liked that style of ball regardless of the evolution of the league. In 20 years,
the NBA doesn't need that. It's like, I think that's his politics.
That shoot like Steph Curry. But I doubt we will hold the same appreciation
Look at that shit.
and affinity
you do that shit in the
players
90s, bro. You're getting benched.
you're
getting kicked out. You're banned from the NBA. You're shadow like
in the 90s, no one looked back at how the league was in the 60s claiming it was better. And so realistically, we shouldn't be looking back at the 80s and 90s claiming the league was superior than it is today, or even just as good for that matter. A lot of these ideas that favor modern basketball are becoming more
mainstream. It's funny how you do this art, because like this man just sits here, right, and he could talk about it for like as long as he wants to, right? And then he's trying to make a difference, right? He's obviously trying to make a difference because I guess it opens something up in my head. But it's like, damn, bro, there's like 8 other billion people that gonna watch. And they're just gonna keep hating. Like,
dive deeper into these.
This is how life is. You can't change shit.
Narratives
you can try, but
around for decades.
You can only do so much.
I think this push to be done with the 80s and 90s is a bit overkill. We want to add context and nuance and knowledge to these discussions, not remove entire decades from it altogether. Sadly, I don't think any of this has or will change anyone's mind. This revolt against old school ball was either confirmation of what you already thought, or this entire discussion is just blasphemy to you. Are we done with the 80s and 90s?
We're done.
Maybe, but for the sake of the game,
We
and
on
the
to better
greats that
things.
paved
On to the
way,
2030s.
I sure hope not.
Oh. Hey, Jordan. Anyways, who has that? Come subscribe.